I would like to begin to introducing Carlos Dorce. He is member of the Barcelona University, and he is a person that knows very well the Silk Road, especially in the 13th century, because he studied the astronomy of the Silk Road during this period of time. Then I am sure that his presentation will be very interesting for all of us. Thank you, Carlos. What do you want?
Thank you very much, Rosa. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and night, everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you. And thank you for inviting me to this great space to share knowledge. I'm going to talk about the Silk Road and the medieval observatories that were built in this important route in all times. Then I'm going to put the presentation. I think I can do it. Now, are you seeing the presentation? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, then my presentation is called Medieval Astronomical Observatories Along the Silk Road. It's obvious that in the Middle Ages, there were a very prolific astronomical activity. The Ptolemy's Almagest and handy tables were well known in Baghdad in the 9th century. And also the Indian astronomical treatise by Brahmagupta arrived to Baghdad in the 8th century. And from Baghdad, all this knowledge was spread ahead. For example, all the astronomical activity in Al-Andalus, in the Iberian Peninsula, it was made from the astronomical tables by Brahmagupta, not by Ptolemy. Then this is my little part of the earth that is my part, that is the main route of the Silk Road. And here you have all the main cities of this main route. All these cities were very important in the medieval, a lot of cities were the capitals of a very big empires. When you have a very big empire, the king built a palace. And in this palace, there were an observatory. Astronomy was very important in all these kingdoms. And for example, there were a lot of palaces that in the gardens, they had armillary spheres or quadrants, and all the astronomical activity were carried out in all these gardens. For example, we start our travel at the beginning of the 9th century in Baghdad. I could focus our attention also in Rome, in Istanbul, or Beijing, but I think that all these cities is a very good example of everything. And then when Al-Mamun built the House of Wisdom in Baghdad in the 9th century, one of the first things that he did was build a library and an observatory. In this observatory, the Shamsiyya Observatory, worked the main astronomers of the world in that time, like Sanat ibn Ali or Yahya ibn Abi Mansur, Al-Khwarizmi or Al-Jawhari. All these people were very important in Baghdad. And in Damascus, there Yahya ibn Abi Mansur and Khalid ibn Abd al-Malik also worked there. They had a very prolific astronomical activity in Baghdad and Damascus. And we know, and is one of the first times that we have recorded that date is that Yahya ibn Abi Mansur had an instrument like this, an armillary sphere. This is a representation in the space of our universe on that time. And he had also quadrants. So in the 9th century, the astronomical activity was in a very high level, because if you want to make this kind of instrument, you must be very clever, of course. Some years later, we begin with a lot of astronomical activity. In Baghdad, the Banu Musa brothers had private observatories, and they carry out a lot of astronomical observations. In Rey, in Tehran, nowadays, Abu al-Fat al-Hiwari determined the latitude of Rey in the 950 with a very big mural quadrant. With all this data, we know all the instruments that the observatories had. In Dinawar, al-Dinawari made astronomical observations. And in Raqqa, that is very near the main route, al-Batani was the most eminent astronomer. And he was a very prolific astrolabe maker. This is an astrolabe. This is an astrolabe that maybe it was like a cellular now. It was one of the most important instruments that has been made in all times. As you can see, Baghdad, there were a lot of people, astrolabe makers, like Ahmad ibn Khalaf in the 10th century of Hatif, and all these instruments you can use this instrument if you know the latitude of the place. Right? For example, here you have the representation of the sky in a latitude of Baghdad. So each trader or each businessman who need to travel, he need to have an astrolabe. I know this is well known. If this is this is the Earth and this is the equator, and we are here in this latitude, at night, if we, and this is our horizon, if we look at the polar star, the altitude of the polar star is the same as our latitude. Okay, this is so if all the astrolabes had the yearly date to know the altitude of the polar star, and afterwards in the reverse you can see a representation of the sky to know the exact time at night. This is a clock. This is a clock, and a nocturne clock. And all these points out some stars in the sky. So it was very important to know the latitude of the place. And here we have all the latitudes of the main cities. All these cities are more than 33 degrees of latitude and are between 33 and 42. And with only two plates, with only two astrolabes, you can go along the Silk Road. In the 12th century, we have observatories again in Baghdad, and also we have the Malik Shah Observatory that we don't know where it was placed, but maybe Mer, Nishapur, or Rey. Then it means that there were astronomical activity in all these cities, because Omar Khayyam was traveling along the Silk Road in all these cities. And he was a very, very important astronomer and mathematician. a little more in the 13th century, we have astronomical activity in Merv, and the Chinese traveler Chang Chung reports a man named Li at the Church Observatory in Samarkand. We have the first evidence that Samarkand was a very important city with an astronomical observatory. And Albadi Asturlabi, an astrolabe maker, was in Baghdad. And in Gaocheng, we have this very beautiful observatory. So we have in all times a lot of observatories in all these cities. Beijing. I need to talk about Beijing because we have in Beijing, in the 13th century, this person, Jamaluddin, that it was thought that it was a Chinese astronomer, but no, this is the Chinese transliteration of Jamal al-Din, an Islamic astronomer from Bukhara that was working in China. So the bridge between cultures in the 13th century was evident because China, a lot of Muslim people were working in Beijing. And in Damascus, Ibn al-Shatir made an azimuthal quadrant. All these astronomical instruments have the part for measuring the latitude, and afterwards measuring all the other astronomical parameters that they need to know the hours or know the position in the Earth. And finally, because 15 minutes are 15 minutes, in the 15th century, the big observatory was in Samarkand. Maybe it's one of the most important observatories in the world. In this case, Ulugh Beg was the king, and the king was the astronomer. So he built a very big observatory for him. We have the letters that Al-Kashi, that was one of the astronomers who worked in Samarkand, Al-Kashi wrote letters to his father, and from these letters we know that Ulugh Beg was a very clever king, and he was a very rigorous man in the determination of latitudes of the places and the observation of the stars. So we must think that maybe in the 15th century here in Samarkand was the most important observatory of the world. All the people who made the Silk Road stopped in Samarkand. There were a lot of caravanserais to stop. So it's probably that we can think that everybody could buy an astrolabe or a watch or something to measure the time at night and at day. And I think I've been polite with the time. I don't know if you have any question or something.
Thank you very much. Remember that you can also put your questions in the chat space. I can not see any question for a moment. And I don't know if Rosa wants to mention something.
Maybe I would like to know what is the situation of these observatories in this moment. It is possible to visit if somebody is interested, or they are practically impossible to visit because they are in a bad situation for the many years that they have, of course.
I think that is it possible to visit without the pandemic situation? Is it possible to visit one in Beijing? In Samarkand, it's possible to visit the ruins. There is another observatory in Maraga, in Iran. And I think it's one in India, but it's very, very modern. The other observatories are lost, are absolutely lost. Because one observatory, when we think now in an observatory, we think in a building with all the things that an observatory needs. It was not the case. We have in the Middle Ages, we had a palace, and in the palace where the observatory was placed. So if the palace now, it was a room in a palace, only a room in a palace. And then if the palace is destroyed, there is no room.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we have one in Samarkand, the one in Samarkand that it's the, a ver, si el trobo, no puc. This is Samarkand nowadays. And you can visit the big quadrant that is this. Does it is here is downstairs.
Yes.
I would like to open the possibility to Mahdi.
Yes.
He's from Iran.
Yes,
And
thank you. Thank
to
you.
other people. Yeah, Mahdi?
Yeah, thank you, dear Carlos, for your great presentation. It was very good. It was nice to hear, many things about actually my country that you said, and all of them was true and very good. And for the question of Rosa, I just want to mention something, to add something about these observatories. There was an important observatory that still is, and you can see, the observatory from the 13th century in Iran, in Maraga. Maraga is in the northwestern of Iran, and the scientist that was, built this observatory was Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi, which he is a very, very famous and important scientist, in astronomical, instrument, built an astrolabs and everything, and kind of very important thing that he has done in the observatory was that he transferred many books about astronomy, about science, by the Silk Road into different countries. One of the important things that we have done. And maybe someday I prepare some more information about him, about the Maraga Observatory, and if I can find some photos of this observatory right now that you can see some part of it, and send it to Rosa or the other participant after meeting, that you can see that.
Please,
it still can be visited.
I want to, sorry, my doctoral dissertation was about Muhi al-Din al-Maghribi, who worked in Maraga with Nasir al-Din al-Tusi.
Yes.
And all the books of Muhi al-Din al-Maghribi have the Andalusian knowledge, mathematics that were made in the Arabian Peninsula, and in the books of Maraga in the 13th century. So there is a connection between the two Muslim worlds, the Western Muslim world and the Oriental Muslim world.
I would like to ask that, as you know, what are the proceedings of this session? Then, if you have some comments, some images, something to send to us, please do it, because we can include this discussion in the proceedings.
Yes.
1-2 minutes to Samir, because he's in India, and he said that they have some observatories related to Samarkand. Samir?
Yeah, thanks, Rosa. Thanks all. So yes, in India, like what Carlos was talking about, we have Jantar Mantar, which was built in around 1724 century. So there were 5 observatories out of one, which was, destroyed in Mathura by Britishers during the Great Revolt. So there were 5 observatories. The one in Delhi is the first one, which was made by the king, ruler Jai Singh. And what he did is basically he sent his astronomers at that time, whatever priests were there who were having knowledge about astronomy and whatever cultures were there, because India was a place where each and every culture was coming and going. So we were also learning many things in astronomy, and many others were observing how we are observing things. So he sent his dignitaries to Samarkand also. So Samarkand is the base of Jantar Mantar. Jantar Mantar is not an ancient observatory. It's more of a medieval observatory what we have, but it is one of the largest sundials, you can say, stone-based equinoctial stone-based sundial in world. And the one in Delhi is the smallest one, you can say, or rather the first one. So space was less. So whatever instruments they could make is in Delhi. After that, they made in other places, especially the Jaipur one. So Jaipur one is much better in terms of accuracy or in terms of space and how the yantras have been placed. So Jantar Mantar, Jantar means yantra or instruments, you can say, in Sanskrit or in Hindi. And mathematical calculations is the meaning of Jantar Mantar. So mantra is not the mantras what we have in Hindi or Hinduism, but it is more to do with the mathematics calculations what we have. So Jantar Mantar has so many celestial, each and every yantra or each and every instrument has a different purpose. So sundial is there, which can measure to the 20th second of what we have right now, sunrise and sunset based on the shadow of the sun. And then even planetary motion is there, or even moon lunar phases are there. Based on that, we can do. So it is a kind of enhancement of Samarkand. So Samarkand is the base. All the instrument, whatever Carlos has shown the pic of Samarkand inside. So how the sunlight was entering and under the subway. So that is how basically it is working.